What's up you guys, Mo Awesome from Awesome MTB and welcome to the Awesome MTB Ultimate XC Bike Shootout. What's going on you guys, Mo Awesome from Awesome MTB. We have been testing out 7 of the best XC bikes on the market to really dissect each bike and figure out who each bike is for. And today's dedicated review is going to be to the Mondraker F-Podium. Now for those of you not familiar with Mondraker, they're actually a Spanish brand. However, they're making a really big US push. And in this video, we're going to be breaking down the Mondraker F-Podium, telling you guys what I absolutely loved about this bike, also telling you guys some things that I don't necessarily love about this bike. Before we get into the actual review of this bike, I do want to give a huge shout out to Pro Bike Supply. Once again, you guys, going into this buyer's guide, we knew that we needed to partner up with a shop that not only was a high caliber in terms of bikes that they carry, but also really knew what they were doing when it came to frame up builds, because there's going to be so much that we're going to be dissecting within these bikes, and Pro Bike Supply is that shop. They're one of the most awesome bike shops out there, and they really do specialize in custom builds. They want to make sure that you are getting on the exact bike that you want. So many really awesome brands to choose from, and if they don't carry a brand that you have been eyeing up, I can't recommend them enough for custom builds. They know custom builds like no other shop out there. The customer service is second to none. On top of that, they actually have professional mechanics building up your bike. So you can rest assured that when your bike is delivered to you, because they ship all over the country, it is going to be built up by some of the best mechanics in America. They also take care of friends of the channel, so be sure to tell them that we sent you and they will take care of you guys. And with that being said, let's get into the Mondraker F-Podium. So as for the actual bike, once again, you guys, this is the Mondraker F-Podium in the RR build. In terms of the travel, this bike actually has the least amount of travel in the shootout. It actually only has 110 mils of rear travel and 120 millimeters of front travel. However, there are some things I do want to touch on that a little bit later in this review, but yeah, this is a 110 mil rear travel bike. I went with the size extra large because once again, I am 6'2", and I run XL across all of my bikes in the mountain division. Fox 34 step cast fork up front with a Fox rear shock, and this is going to be Fox's remote lockout. It's actually a 3-position system with the lever up front. Now there are going to be a couple of parts on here like the handlebars, the stem, and the dropper post that are actually going to be Mondraker's in-house brand. A mechanical X01 drivetrain on here. For the wheel, Mavics Crossmax's carbon wheels on here. Have Recon Races front and rear. And yes, the frame itself actually only has room for 1 water bottle. However, this has to be one of the most unique looking bikes in the test. Obviously, as you guys can tell by the skinny tubing, man, when you look at this bike and you're like, whoa, what is that? And I definitely noticed that a lot out on the trails. And for the brakes, running SRAM level brakes, but these are going to be the 2-piston offering. Now, the F-Podium RR is coming in at about $8,000 MSRP, and it comes in weighing at 26 pounds, which once again, the weight range of this series has been 24 to 26 pounds. And yes, this is a little bit on the upper end of that spectrum. However, they do offer a few other builds that are definitely going to come in lighter. I think the best thing to do right now is to actually go take this bike on the trails, bring you guys along with us so you can see this bike in action. All right, you guys, another day, another bike review coming at you from the XC Shootout. Today we're on the Mondraker Podium, the F-Podium, the RR build. Those of you that might not be familiar with Mondraker, they have one of the most insane looking bikes. I'm sure you guys saw it earlier. The tubing on these things are so uniquely Mondraker that it's impossible to miss this bike when you're out on the trails. Timing bit starts, and I'm gonna lock out the suspension via the push remote, which is a Fox, one of the only Fox remote lockout bikes in this test. If you're looking for a very stiff lockout, the Fox tends to have that. And that's something I do notice, like right now it's fully locked out, and it's definitely a little harsher of a lockout over RockShox. Almost at the top. How's it going, guys? Good, good. Whew, that's a brutal one. All right, we're gonna go straight to everyone's favorite part, the downhill. And this is where the Mondraker really does shine. You can tell they put a lot of freaking thought into how this bike grips downhill. And it definitely has one of the most comfortable front end feel and very active overall suspension feel. And man, the first thing I noticed, first ride on this bike, was how comfortable I felt almost instantly. The bike has so much traction coming from the front end, and it's so apparent as soon as you hit the trails. Ooh. Oh my God. Endless amounts of traction, even though I'm running a Recon Race front and rear. I would say traction is the name of the game when it comes to the Mondraker. I will say high bottom outs like that, high speed bottom outs, you definitely need to tune the shock a little bit more so on the Mondraker. I do feel like that mid-stroke support is not necessarily its strongest suit. However, that initial stroke where a lot of that traction comes from, as well as the overall travel, feels very good. Long and low is the name of the game with the Mondraker. Let's just jump into that. God, this bike feels so good. Try doing that 50 times, and that's been my last 2 weeks. Climbing is where a lot of people are also going to be interested on these XC bikes, obviously. And the Mondraker, both unlocked and locked, the anti-squat is really awesome on this bike. That Fox lockout does feel significantly stiffer. Here's where a little bit of the tech climb starts. It would be nice too to have a good middle setting on this lockout. Unfortunately, the Fox remote lockout that this build is spec'd with, I've been struggling with that middle setting. And it does feel like it's just kind of on, off, and to get to that middle setting, it's very easy to miss. So, with that being said, I think I prefer the RockShox lockout, as well as flight attendant, obviously. Now, another thing I want to note about Fox suspension is it definitely has a much more racy profile when it comes to descending. You can definitely tell this is race-oriented suspension, and it feels really good at high speeds, like this super chunky rock garden. Oh man, gotta focus on this lower half. Getting so beat up down here. Nice. The Mondraker, time and time again through that, felt like the most stiff of the frames. Now that's a good and a bad thing. Like I said, stiffness is definitely faster. And when you look at on paper on the times, as we'll talk about in the end, definitely one of the faster bikes to the test through that. However, I can also see a somewhat fatiguing element if this was to be your do-it-all trail bike, which I don't think a lot of people are falling in that category. Do see this as probably one of the more racy style bikes in this test. Oh my God. Starting to get a little bit scary how far I'm pushing these XC bikes. Definitely see the Mondraker as one of the more race-oriented full suspension bikes in this category. Really interested in is to see how the Zero suspension performs on their more trail and enduro offerings, because I am super stoked that I have finally found some form of a VPP through the Zero suspension that I actually like. That was the test loop on this bike. Let's go talk about it. Hopefully you guys like that ride on the Mondraker F-Podium. Let's talk about the things I absolutely love about this thing. I will say this bike has to have been one of the most confident, inspiring ones right out of the box. Basically, as soon as I put pedals on, I actually have a riding buddy that's been riding with me all of these tests, and he noticed that I was substantially more confident first ride on this bike than any other bike in the 7-bike shootout. I think a lot of that is going to be attributed to Mondraker's forward geometry. Once again, you guys, this bike has 10 millimeters less travel than most other bikes in the shootout. However, I never really felt that on the trails. You really do feel like the front of the bike is glued to the ground. And once again, you guys, it does inspire a level of confidence out on the trails on these Recon race tires that I never thought I would ever actually have. I think a lot of my enjoyment on the Mondraker F-Podium is actually going to come down to the suspension design. So once again, you guys, this is a Zero suspension design. It's Mondraker's own. I have to say that this probably was one of the most impressive initial strokes of travel I have felt on a bike. I think a lot of that confidence and trust in these tires on this bike is coming from this bike truly does feel like it is glued to that ground in that initial stroke. Now, another thing that I really like about this bike is actually the frame itself. The stiffness in this frame is pretty insane. And as soon as you get out of the saddle to sprint, you really do notice that stiffness. It feels like the power transfer is there. And then also on the downhills, the bike has a very precise nature feel to it. And I will say this will transition slightly into a little bit of a negative that I did feel on the Mondraker F-Podium. I will say for longer endurance style rides, I definitely noticed myself a little bit more fatigued overall, especially after super chunky bits. Not necessarily to the point where I'm saying it's a deal breaker, but it is something to notice when I am comparing it to something like the Yeti ASR or the Specialized Epic. Now, something I do want to talk about is going to be the different build options. Like I said, this comes with Fox suspension with the Fox remote lockout. I personally am not the biggest fan of the Fox remote lockout. I like the RockShox twist lockout, has a little bit better of a mid setting. And on top of that, I do actually think that the Mondraker F-Podium can benefit from the RockShox SID, because I definitely felt like the RockShox suspension, especially the SID, has a little bit more of a muting feel, where the Fox suspension definitely feels a little bit more racy. If you want to counterbalance some of that frame stiffness and you want a little bit more of a muted feel from your suspension, I could definitely see going with one of Mondraker's offering with RockShox suspension to really be a benefit with the Mondraker F-Podium. So summarizing things up, like I said, one of the stiffest frames in the test, as well as the most confident, inspiring right out of the box. You get on this bike and you really push it to its limits, and you never really find that. I went into this bike thinking, okay, it's gonna have 10 mils of less travel as all the other bikes. I'm gonna be limited. This bike really pushed me to be a better rider, and I could trust that the bike was gonna do its job, and so I could just focus on going as fast as I could. So huge shout out to Mondraker for making a really awesome cross-country bike. Is this gonna be one of the better bikes in the shootout? What awards does this win? You will have to stay tuned for the end of the awesome MTB XC Buyer's Guide. Subscribe to the channel to make sure you don't miss out on any of the videos. Let me know in the comment section too if you have any questions about this bike or the build. Happy to answer all of them for you. Until next time, you guys, ride awesome and stay tuned for the conclusion.